Good morning and welcome to OSW Daily. Thank you for joining us this morning. If this is your first time coming across the channel, please consider subscribing and liking the channel and get that notification bell so you're alerted to all upcoming videos. So what do we do here each day? Each day we bring on thought leaders, industry experts to talk about the topics that you're talking about, all related to work. And today it's no exception. So first up, before we get into the topics for today, who am I? My name is Steve Todd. I'm the Global Head of Workplace at NASDAQ. I'm also the founder of Open Source Workplace. OSW is related to Open Source Workplace, and I'd encourage you to go out and check out our website, www.opensourceworkplace.com, for all related content related to workplace. So what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk about adaptability, an organizational superpower. What is employee adaptability? What is Unlearn Ability? Interesting concept, but what does that mean, and why can it boost your adaptability for employees by up to 40%? And what increases adaptability at work? What influences stress at work? So these are big topics, and today I'm very happy to welcome guest Ira Wolfe to OSW Daily. Ira is a top 10 global leader, future of work and HR. He's a workplace futurist, recruitment marketing strategist, employee selection expert, author, TEDx speaker, virtual keynote speaker, and podcaster. So without further ado, let me introduce and bring in Ira Wolfe. Ira, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us this morning.
Hey, good morning, Steve. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
It's I was going through that list and trying to sort of come up with that, sort of cut down that list of what you do, and I only got a few things down there. Man, you've done a lot. You've done a lot. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, Ira.
Yeah, that's interesting. I moved, oh gosh, it's now 12 years. Time flies. 12 or 13 years ago, I actually moved when I first went virtual. Had lived in Pennsylvania, and I moved to Maryland. And when I got down there and I started to introduce myself to people, the local newspaper interviewed me as coming down there, one of the throwaways in our community. And the title of it was The Renaissance Man. So, yeah. So, I've had, and again, at one time, a Renaissance man or someone who had all these titles was, oh, can't hold down a job. That wasn't necessarily the standard of success. That you had a lot of different careers, not a lot of different careers, but a lot of different paths or expertise. What was it? The master of all, but of none. That type of
I
thing.
know you mean. Yeah.
Now it's the blueprint. It's sort of got to be in people's DNA to be. We're going to talk about adaptability, but to
Yeah.
be adaptable and fluid, and it's not unusual for people to have a lot of different careers. I just read where Gen Z is expected to have 17 jobs. I mean, full time, not just part time, but in their adult lives, 17 jobs in 5 different industries.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a
What?
change from our parents, grandparents, at least mine. Um, Gen X sort of got into the point, and especially millennials, where adults, where their parents did not have the same job for 30 or 40 years and get the gold watch at the end. But
Yeah.
for most Gen X and certainly baby boomers, you had one career, you had one job, you moved up the career ladder within the same company or sometimes in the same job
Mm-hmm.
for years, and you got rewarded that way. And now that's, again, 17 different jobs in 5 different industries, which is also a change in the outlook, is, getting into a transferable skills. What can I take from one to the other? There's a lot on the employer side. There's still a lot of challenge. There's still a lot of problems with that, because people say, well, they don't have experience in our industry. And you should go, great. So thank
I,
you.
I
Let's
I
come
hear
in.
that all the time. It is interesting, and there's the shocking number of it, because you look at your career, but you've done many things. I look at my own career. I look at my parents' career, and I look at my peers, and we've probably worked for a few companies, maybe, and we've pretty much been in the same path. I'm in my second path. My original was finance, and now I'm in the real estate world. But it's one astounding in the fact that 17 5 industries, but at the same time, that's kind of exciting, right?
Yeah, and again, I maybe I don't have 17 different jobs, and maybe I do with the job titles. If you consider
Right.
all those jobs, I consider those all bundled in part of that. But you came from finance. I basically came from dentistry. I mean, I started out a career. I mean, somewhere, I did my TED talk and introduced this a little bit. And people say, well, how did you make that move? I loved everything about dentistry, but dentistry. And I just had a conversation yesterday about this. It's like, how did you go from one to the other? And that wasn't my problem. The day I walked out the door, I started this business. Now, this business has evolved, and it's not exactly what I thought it would be, but I'm not sure I knew exactly what it would be, and that was a good thing because I evolved with the times. But what did I learn that I could transfer from science, and it was a pre-med. I mean, and then obviously those skills. Well, drilling and filling and cleaning teeth and taking X-rays, the technical side of that, there's really not a lot of parallels to do that. But the science side of it, the diagnostics, I loved the diagnostics. I loved people coming in with a problem that I couldn't solve. Obviously, if somebody came in with a hole in their tooth, I can fill it. If they came in with bleeding gums, I can look at that. But sometimes problems weren't always that clear. Just because somebody had pain and you can see the hole in the tooth doesn't mean that was associated. There's an assumption. And so I always looked at it. I don't know where that came from. Some with genetics, I guess. I don't know where that came from, but I always looked at it as let's not just see a hole and fill it. Let's look at there could be other consequences. And, teeth were attached to the whole body, and there could be other reasons. But beyond that, so I learned good critical thinking skills. I learned how to diagnose. But on the business side, I haven't practiced in 20. I literally left 25 years ago. Had a very successful practice. Was playing a ton of golf to kind of as a saving grace of how do I balance this life, because I really didn't like going to the office. I like building it, growing it, making it thrive, working with the people, educating people, being part of the community. When I walked through those doors, and after somebody said, well, if you think so, doc, yeah, I'll do that root canal and a crown. It was like, I was done. I just didn't want to do it. And I didn't. So I left. I was completely burnt out. And I started this. But the skills that I learned literally 25 years after I left, I basically walked out on my employees, on my team I didn't walk out. I sold the practice to my partner. But I still get birthday cards. I get holiday cards. I get greetings. They're friends on Facebook. They're checking in on us. I grew the team. I still hear from patients. I haven't treated anybody in 25 years. And yet there's still a relationship there. That's what I built. And that was transferable. How I built that business, you could build in any business.
So what is that relationship thing you did? I mean, what made that so successful for you?
I guess it's some of the buzzword. That's a great question, by the way. I talked about the technical, sort of the business acumen stuff that you would do. But it was relating with people. It didn't happen a lot. I'm a marketer at heart. Okay, so maybe that's where it was. Is how do you engage people? How do you become more than just a dentist? How do you become more than just the retailer, their transportation, their stockbroker, their finance guy, their banker? It doesn't really matter. And one is you knew about the people. So regardless of who came in, we always chatted a lot of it. But from the day we came in, from the day I opened, we created a newsletter, again, just to communicate with people. It wasn't a direct marketing thing. It was just to let people know. And partly I did it because if they got a newsletter in 6 months, we did it quarterly. So if they got they're supposed to come in every 6 months. If they got a newsletter, they came in 6 months. And it was like, oh, it's time. They would call us because they'd say, oh, we got your newsletter and you didn't call us yet for our appointment, so we're ready to do it. But we sent out birthday cards. When I left, I had an assistant who knew the community really well. I did not grow up there. And what she did was there was these little throwaway newspapers. So I'm showing my age. I mean, when you've got like 3 newspapers on your front door. And we clipped any patient that we saw or a child of a patient. We cut it out in the newspaper, which is also showing my age, and put it into a scrapbook. We had 50 scrapbooks when I left.
Wow.
And when people were used to come in, like parents would come in, because I practiced for 18 years. So there were some people that came in, had gotten married, had children. They would bring their kids in and show them the pictures of like when they were in high school and doing things. There were little things. It was relating to people. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was kind of walking in other people's shoes. And empathy has almost become a buzzword these days. When you understand what it is, you literally can walk in other people's shoes, which sort of leads into the adaptability side, because
Right.
one of the factors in adaptability, which we'll get into, I know, is mental flexibility. And mental flexibility is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts in your head at the same time. And we have to do that right now.
Right.
We're in this political, within a week, we may or may not know the president, but we got this political thing going on. We hear opposing thoughts, and it's always a binary choice. That's right or that's right. That's fake news. That's real news. What if they're both right? What if they're both have validity? What if they're both correct? How do you make sense of it? And that's just one thing. I mean, just because you can do that doesn't mean you can apply it. But the ability to do that is really unique, and it can be developed. I mean, and so when we talk about, what some dimensions of adaptability, one of the means of adaptability is how do you teach people to do that? Now, there's some people that are going to be more innately. I mean, it's just natural. They can do it. Other people can learn how to accept that. And that's going to be important. I mean, there is no one that's going to have, people are just waiting for this right answer. People are saying, good, we got a vaccine, we're going to be better. If we wear a mask, it'll go away. No, it's not happening like that. It's not a binary choice. And now the important question is, and we all wish there were more leaders like this, how do we make sense of all the noise? And what if all the noise is important? What if it's all true? And how do we pull it all together? And that's sort of the world we live in. And obviously, there's a lot of people struggling with that.
No, it is. And when you talk about adaptability, I think what changes that adaptability is perspective, right? The perspective, you can look at a glass half full or half empty, and it all depends on your perspective and how you're going to view it. And I think that's a great way to maybe segment into what we're going to talk about. I'm going to pull up some questions to sort of set the framework for what it really is we want to go into, what we want to discuss. And, I read you kindly sent me a white paper, Ira, and you had a number of questions in this white paper all about adaptability. And I read through these questions, and in my head immediately went to the problems I'm trying to solve for at the workplace, right? What are employees going through? What are leadership going through? What are companies going through? What are industries going through? And these are questions that were written in 2019 for a report and a white paper you were putting together. And they still apply, even probably more so today, because it's relatable to everybody. Everyone around the world can read these and go, okay, how many employees, what percentage of positions and roles will need to change substantially in the next 2-4 years? I look at my role, okay, I do leasing. What happens with leasing down the road, right? Whenever you think about, okay, right. Right, and it's like, so how will those things change? So I just really want to put this into perspective for folks to read, digest what this is as we go through adaptability and what we're going to talk about, why it's so important. Because as people try to think of the answers to these questions, I think the context of the conversation, I think, is going to help provide some guidance on how to answer. So you do have the adaptability quotient. Is that how I pronounce it?
Quotient.
Quotient. Thank you. Thank you.
Similar to like IQ.
IQ. Yeah.
Quotient. And then EQ. We've certainly been popular with since the 1990s. People are probably familiar with that. Emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. And then adaptability quotient, which was identified by Harvard Business Review and a couple other organizations, but they probably have the most famous publication on that. Identified it as the new competitive edge, as the number one skill that people are going to need.
So you mentioned employee adaptability, right? We've obviously put the visuals of what's been captured here, but let's start with, what is employee adaptability?
Well, let's just take adaptability. It's beyond employees. Okay, just what does adaptability means?
Mm.
And there's been numerous definitions, but it really is a capacity to change your behavior and your response. So it's a skill. It's not just flexibility. It's way beyond flexibility. Flexibility is sort of a reactive response to that. Flexibility is, we'll see, we can fit into any environment. Well, the environment we have now is pretty toxic. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to fix that. So how do you not just cope or collapse in that? We'll talk a little bit about that, but how do we go there? So the adaptability is our capacity to behave and respond, and this is important, in an uncertain world, and get and be effective and get good outcomes. So it's not only just responding to the environment, but it's to make sense of the environment, and it's to be able to grow and thrive in that environment and get the result you want. So just because someone threw you a bunch of lemons doesn't mean you can't make lemonade.
Right.
And that's what adaptability is. And there's only a small percentage of people that are effective to do that. Through that study, there there was a survey done, the AQ Global study, and through that study, they identified that 1 out of 3 people are really low on adaptability, but only 1 in 4 people, well, 25%, were high. And with the environment we live in today, we need people that are very skilled at adaptability, especially the leaders, to be able to get there. So we have people, a third of the population struggling. We have a quarter of the population has the capability to do this, but that leaves 75% of the people who are anywhere from mild to severely impacted by figuring out how do we go forward. And I'm not sure right now, I'm not sure there's anybody standing out, especially in the political field, of, of leading us to adaptability.
And so you take those results, right? So 25% are excelling. How do we then apply that sort of metric to today's environment?
Yeah, and that's the important part. That's why I'm so enthused and engaged with the AQ. The AQ came out of research and recognizing that we just like empathy, a lot of other things, grit, resilience. We these terms get thrown out there, I'm in the high. By the way, just we didn't even get into this. I mean, my business is Success Performance Solutions. You can see it behind me, I guess. The What we do is we primarily provide pre-employment and leadership testing to companies, and we use a lot of the personality tests. And one of the most popular ones is, many people might be familiar with DISC and Myers-Briggs. We don't use those for hiring, but for team building, so they still have a role. But we use what they call the Big Five. It's the Ocean model, and with that, that is the core of most pre-hire assessments or pre-leadership assessments that people use. And out of that, we can identify people who are hardwired for adaptability or flexibility or dealing with stress or competitiveness or team players, and you can pull all of it together. But it wasn't necessarily looked at as a skill. It just said you're just hardwired. You just fit in that. What 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 we were able to identify, and I say we, I mean AQAI, the
Mm-hmm.
organization that I'm working with, they were able to go through the science, and they looked at hundreds of different studies that were done on each of these aspects: resilience, grit, open-mindedness, team play, mental flexibility, the personality traits, and culture and environment. What impact did that have? And they said, which of these could be measured? Which of these could be changed within people or within your surroundings to affect how adaptable you were? And again, going from that scale from collapse, is the
Mm-hmm.
adaptability going to force you to collapse? Are you Do you have the ability to cope with it, which is very stressful, by the way, and a lot of people are under that, but you're not, you're just coping. Or do you have the ability, how do you differentiate that from the people who can grow and thrive? And
Mm.
that's the goal. By the way, the AQAI mission is to ensure that no humans left behind. That's the mission behind that. That was the purpose of developing this. How can we ensure that people just don't, one is we hope nobody collapses, but that's going to happen, or business models. But how do we help prevent that? How do we not just take people from collapse to cope, but how do we really help everybody grow and thrive? And ultimately, the big goal is thriving. And by doing that, we had to identify things we could change, skills. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't look at adaptability as a personality trait, but you look at it as a skill, it now you have a roadmap. And what happened is we were able to identify through all the research, and then took this to academics. And the academics looked at it and said, is it possible to build a tool that can assess people and that we can use as a benchmark, going back to my doctor days, take the x-ray, diagnose it, say, here's your problem, let's fix it.
Mm.
Here's the course of action we need. And by doing that's what the AQAI is. That's what the assessment is. And by doing that, we're able to have a roadmap. And basically, it's harmless. It's not painful. The assessment takes 20 to 21 minutes. Actually, right now, it's taking 26 minutes out of everybody who's taking it. The average time is 26 minutes. Some are less, some are more. It's done through it's done through a conversational chatbot. So it's not your traditional assessment, because we wanted better results than what you got from that. And what we found is people who interact with the assessment, not just say, sometimes I feel sad when, or sometimes I'm energetic. I'm more energetic when I'm surrounded by lots of people, that type of thing. I strongly agree, I disagree. We still have to use that type of question, but how it's delivered, we've got a more valid, accurate response by doing it as part of a conversation. Now, we couldn't possibly go out there and interview 100 million people to be able to do this, but we could do that through a conversational chatbot. So technology came to our rescue. So the chatbot was built that there's a conversation. If you and I took it exactly the same time, how the questions are delivered, the background, some of the images that were due would be different, because it was based on our responses. So it's a very personalized experience going through the questionnaire. Then you get the results, and the results were broken into 3 different areas. The results, it was basically, we call it the ACE model. It's ability, character, and environment. So when we go back to talking about how do we measure it, what we were able to do is identify what were the dimensions under ability, what were the dimensions under character, and what were the dimensions under environment that were most impactful. Which ones, if people changed or understood, would result in better outcomes for that individual or collectively for the team. So the ability, the AQ ability was broken up into 5 different areas. We identified 5 dimensions. You're going to recognize these names. And the first time I was introduced to this, I looked and I thought, this is really cool. These people literally took the 5 buzzwords that everybody's talking about and put them into an assessment. So as the marketing hat goes on, it's like, oh, cool, I got this. But there was really science. There really is solid science behind it. So we looked at grit, resilience, heard me say that before, mental flexibility, mindset, which we talk about a lot, and unlearning, which you addressed in the beginning. So we were able to measure each one independently, and that's also important. It's not collective. It's not like you get this ability score. It also is, they're little levers. And if you increase one, how does that impact the other? If we recognize that one wasn't working, we can literally remove it, and it doesn't affect the validity of the rest of the tool. So it was validity and reliability, some of the psychometric importance, but then every scale is independent of one another. And grit, people, it's kind of that passion, that's perseverance, is long term. It's not just that people short term can get through a day. It's can they keep the eye on the ball? Can they see the long term? But resilience was more important. In fact, resilience was the number 1 dimension that seemed that a little improvement in resilience could impact the overall adaptability greater than anything else. So we're able to say, where should we work first? So if somebody has a weakness on resilience, then that would be the area, because that's going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Now, if everybody's, if you or your team scores 80 or 90% in resilience, terrific. You guys can bounce back. You get knocked over, you bounce back. You knocked over, you bounce back. Great. But if you don't have grit, you don't have mental flexibility, the ability to balance a few different uh, contradictory ideas, opposing ideas in your head at the same time. How do you do that? Mindset is really a lot of it. It's not exclusively based on this, but a lot of it was based on Carol Dweck's work of mindset, fixed mindset, and growth mindset. Fixed mindset is, hey, I'm a star athlete, I'm a star student, I got a 4.0, I can't take that course, or I can't take that job because I won't, people will think I'm not as good as I thought I was. I don't want to take those challenges anymore. So you sort of protect your image. Where growth is, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. We're gonna accept challenges, and everybody's human. And we're all living in a world where we need this growth mindset. So, but it took it beyond that, because mindset also was influenced by the people we hang with.
Right.
We're only turning on one channel on on TV. You only hear the news from one side, whereas you're bringing people from all different walks of life, and somebody may actually come in on your show and contradict what I'm saying, and then it's like, well, Ira was wrong. Well, what if some of what I said was right, what he said was right, and how do we put it together? So it's affected by the what you read, where you work, your belief systems. And that's what we're trying to get to. How do we help people identify what they're bringing to the table, the tools that they got, and how do we deliver skills to them that they can be much more successful than they possibly think they can be?
And you did mention unlearn ability,
Yeah.
the ability to unlearn. Is that as just as simple as what it says?
Well, it's not simple. Yeah, I mean,
No,
the
no,
definition.
the definition is what I meant. Yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah,
know it's so
for
simple.
years I used to say I did a brain dump. I literally walked out, and I probably can go back in and literally ride the bike again, and go back and do dentistry. Some things have changed. A lot hasn't. I was pretty far ahead. My office was computerized. I keep going back to that to give you an example of who I am and what I did. But we were
Yeah.
computerized in 1987.
Wow.
I mean, and crazy stuff. Had a 10 megabyte hard drive for our server, and they said, "Oh, this will last you a lifetime." Uh, backup tapes took us longer. Had lots of tapes. And then we had cameras. We had those intraoral cameras,
Mm.
magnifying to be able to see. In 1991, I left in 1995, so a lot of some offices still don't have that stuff. It's 25, 30 years later. So I was always ahead of the curve, at that point. But when we bring in unlearning, when I walked out that door, it was like the brain dump. I didn't forget everything I knew, but I had
Right.
to stop. I had to think differently. I had to take what I knew and apply it differently. So unlearning is sort of the brain dump, but it doesn't mean, oh, you forget everything you knew. You just push it to the side. We all have filing cabinets, we have boxes, we have storage units, and you go, someday I'm going to need that. And so we have to figure out how to get it out of the front, the top of our mind, and put it away and say, that model worked before, but it's not working as well now. So how do I evolve that? And I guess one of the I was trying to think of examples for this, especially when to get people to understand it, because people say, I studied all these years, how could I let all that knowledge go? It's just not that easy, and it's not. But think about like the transfer, our working from home.
Right.
When we all go
Mm-hmm.
work from home, we had to learn a new model. And some of the things that we've done, some people have done for years and years and years in work, didn't work anymore. And we had to learn new ways to do that. I started teaching a graduate program last night, so I got thrown into the world of academia, and there's a lot of, especially secondary college education, that professors, the whole institutions, were based around people came and sat in the class, and all of a sudden it's done over Zoom, and just because you could like this, just because we're doing the streaming does not mean that, oh, so I can teach exactly the same way I
Right.
used to teach standing in front of a classroom online. Zoom, it's not that easy. So
Right.
what parts of teaching would, and again, I'm not a teacher by profession, but people who have done that for years, what do they have to unlearn and learn new ways to do it? And sometimes it's just a modification.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's literally saying that method is not working anymore.
Right.
We don't have to call an operator. I grew up when I was really young.
A
I
lot of people
literally
are
had,
listening to you going, I have no idea what you're talking about, Ira.
I mean, it's like pick up the phone and someone would answer. It's like the switchboard hit zero, but that was automatic. And I'd say, "Can you call my mother's store?" And we lived in a small town, and they knew who I was because I had the little hole in the switchboard. And they say, "Oh, she's not there. She's at the hairdresser. You want me to connect her?" Uh, you don't know what it is. Most people have no clue what that is. But through our lifetime, we went from calling an operator to dial, which is nuts because the 911, the longest dial, the operator, the emergency call was operator, and it took us the longest dial to get there.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
to now we got monitors on. My mother, if my parents fall, I know it, and they're a
Right.
thousand miles away.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And I guess to sort of bring that concept to today is like Alexa or Siri, call this, call such and such, right? It's the same principle as calling out operator. But it's. I think what's important is we all have to learn new ways through this time, right? And it's the ability to adapt, and we have to acknowledge as well that mechanism or those four things you said, right? Each individual today can relate to whether they're in that collapse, in the coping, growth, and thriving environment. So I think that's important that we have to acknowledge those things. But you said it's a skill and we all can learn. What would be like the number one thing? I'm just conscious of time here, but uh, skill. What would be the number one skill that you would say to people who is maybe in that coping or collapse position? What things can they be doing today to help?
first, take the AQ. Find out where you are. I mean, it's a baseline. I mean,
Yeah.
and I say that facetiously, but I'm also very real. I mean, our goal is to reach 100 million people by 2030, and help them get through that. So, but again, if there's other means that you can identify your resilience, and again, I don't just mean saying somebody, oh, if you hang around with people who you bounce back more than they do, then you're resilient. That doesn't mean you have the resilience to cope with that. But again, figuring out what are your abilities. Everything I mentioned. Could you develop grit on your own? Yes. Can you be more resilient? Could you be more open minded? Can you learn how to be more mentally flexible? Unlearn. Yeah. Um, but which one should you be working on? And resilience is the number one factor. Resilience, absolutely. How can we bounce back for this? Now, that then relates to a second component. If you also are of a personality that you're much more excitable than you are patient,
Mm,
then if you're reactive, then the fact is that that's not necessarily going to help your resilience. I mean, yeah, you get over it, but it may not be very good for your heart or the people around you if how you're reacting. So all these elements sort of react in that. The other factor too, which is most dominant, and this really is a powerful factor, and people don't always have the ability to change this if they're when they're working. We look at the environment. That's the ACE. So it's ability, character, and environment. Environment was made up of company support. Do people feel that they're getting support? And again, at a very difficult time when everybody was home, you know, how do they feel about that? Was the company good to them? Were they still engaged? Were they checking in on them? Were they helping them set up their home offices? Were they appreciative of, hey, we don't get, we've got kids, we've got low bandwidth, we're living in a 1,200 square foot apartment with four people, you know, uh, all these things going on. What's the company support? What's the team support? Interesting beyond company support, team support was more important. And maybe this goes
mm,
back to Gallup, that you quit your supervisor, and your team. You don't really quit your job.
right.
Is the team support was really the one of the areas that you need to really work on. And from team support, it led to, well, the other aspects of well-being. I won't go through them all, but basically was your emotional health. Does your company, does your environment? Now I'm basically, we're virtual. I'm solo. I'm my boss. If I give myself a low score, is what do I do? What's the challenge? But when I actually went through the assessment, I had to look at that because there's a lot of people that are working independently. Um, do you have a team of people you can call if you're having a rough day? Do you have a peer group? Do you have a mastermind group? Is there a group that supports you, that you feel that's surrounding? Because it can be pretty lonely, especially people were sent from home and they're feeling, and people who were the caregivers before. It's like all the burden falls on them, and that's
Mm.
why women are really the challenge, because they were the primary caregivers. Even and again, this isn't a biased remark. It's a real fact, is that even though women were professionals and they had full-time jobs, they may not be getting paid the same as men, but they were going home and they were taking care of the kids and they were doing the cooking and they were doing all these other chores. And that continued. And there's a lot of single parents as well. And this could go for single fathers too. So there was a lot of additional pressures put on there. So was there support? Did
Mm.
they feel they had that? And then what was their well-being like? And did they get emotional support? So you can have team support, but did you get emotional support? So it looked at all these factors. Now, some of those are hard for you as an individual to change, but sometimes you have to step out. Hey, it's just too negative. I can't watch Fox or CNN or CNBC all day long. I got to turn that off. What are the other things you have to turn off? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's family. They're just down on you. There's people that are negative. There's people that are collapsing, and you want to help them. You don't want to desert them, but you can't help them by, it's that codependent thing. I mean, you can't help people that are struggling. You can. I told my granddaughter this a couple of years ago, and she's going to turn 21 next month, and that's the one lesson. She says, "You always told me I will do anything to help you succeed, and I'm not going to help you fail." And that, I didn't say make a mistake. I said
Mm-hmm.
fail. So there were decisions along the path, especially in high school, the adolescents that got tested and knew it all and said, I'm here for you, but I'm not lifting my finger to help you do that as much as you want. And and she comes back now and but when she came and she said, I need money for this. I want to go to school. I need help. I need a tutor. I was like, okay, how much? What do you need?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but when it came down to some others, still, I won't even go through those decisions. Some
That's
of those
fine.
things, like, yeah, no, I'm not doing it.
But you did
Yeah.
you did mention resilience was the number one thing, and you gave some answers to how people can increase their resiliency. But is there one thing, again? I keep saying time, but it's we keep going. Resilience. What is the one thing? And maybe we'll finish with this. What is the one thing you would say people can do to increase their resilience?
That's actually interesting. And then it's going to come through team support.
Team
You need
support.
support.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't do this alone. I mean, we didn't talk about the acronym of VUCA, which is volatile,
Mm-hmm.
uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's been around for 30 years. I didn't come up with it. It's the military came up with it and said, "Hey, here's the world we're going to live in the future. We're going to be finding enemies in the Ethernet. We're not going to be, going to Europe and for a world war or to Korea or Vietnam. I mean, we're not going to be literally doing these physical fights. We're going to be, and we're seeing that,
Right.
right now through the elections. So VUCA is, I can't think of a more appropriate acronym to describe 2020 is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And one of the questions I'm asking on my interviews and to people is we people need to think of this is what if 2020 is the new normal? Because people keep thinking we're going to go back. I heard Dr. Fauci last night. By the end of 2021, maybe early 2022, people don't want to hear that. We're going to have back to normal. And then somebody says, what's normalcy look like then? And that's what we need to do. And it's going to be uncertain. So, I mean, the resilience is there are certainly skills that specific, activities that you can do to kind of build that. That's going to come from, again, if you're an excitable person, then how do you not jump to conclusions? Um, you know, are you a competitive person that you play to win? That's a
Mm-hmm.
little easier to get there, but there's They're basically short-term goals. So there's a couple different pathways. It's not straightforward, but the solution is make sure you're surrounding yourself by the team. Make sure you're getting multiple aspects of what's going on. Again, doing that juggling around. Um, but emotionally, basically it's an old been around. I've been in this business even 40 years ago when I started my business, first business. Team building was always, if you don't have a good team, you don't have a solid team, you don't have people around you, peer support that you can confide in and that you trust. Uh, Something always will break you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say number one place probably to start in that case, if it's your environment, if it's the people you're hanging with, if it's the thing you're reading, if it's the communities you're in, not isolate yourself, but do what you can to find people that are more supportive, encouraging, that you're engaged with and passionate. That's a thriving part. I mean, ultimately, everybody wants to thrive. Nobody wakes up in the morning and go, oh, let's see how I can be unhappier today than I was yesterday. Let's see if I can be poorer. Let's see if I can fail more often. Unless you have a pathology, in that case, you got a problem, and you need additional help than what we're providing. But moving forward, everybody wakes up with and stuff. Shift happens, as we talked about. How do how do we go forward? And it's surrounding yourself with the right people. And there's if anything that came out good from this pandemic, is that the resources available to people, it's confusing at times, there's so much, the resources available to people to improve your well-being is enormous.
It is.
Whether it's exercise, whether it's chats, whether it's coaching, whether it's counseling, everything that we thought we had to get in a car, drive to an appointment, and pay for it has been disrupted through this pandemic, and that's not going away. So the resources are out there, and I think number one for people is check: are you surrounding yourself with the right people, the right information, the right news, the right learning? And that in itself may lift that burden, and you will be able to improve the adaptability. And again, so small percentages of improvement dramatically increase your adaptability quotient.
All right, fascinating conversation, so relevant to today, and a lot to go through. And we'll put links below for people to go and read the study. But Ira, you're everywhere. But where's the best place to find you?
You can go to, there's a number of places. One is, if anybody's interested in my book, which is Recruiting in the Age of Globalization, and you say, well, we don't recruit, we don't hire people, I'm just an individual. I will tell you the first 130 pages has nothing to do with recruiting. It had to do with everything we were talking about, not per se adaptability, because it was written before I kind of dove off the deep end with this, looking for that. But it was about change. It was about the world we're living in now. We anticipated it would become from technology. So the book's free. So if you go to besthrbook.com, and again, it's not just an HR book, but besthrbook.com, you can actually, other than nominal shipping costs, you can get a copy for free, and it'll be sent out. On there, you will have all my links. But if anybody wants the link directly and doesn't want the book, I'm on LinkedIn. So just look up my name. It's going to show up. I'm on there all the time. Website, Success Performance Solution. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, that's usually where kind of common area, and YouTube.
Great. And we'll put links into all those locations, so it'll be easy for people to connect with you. Ira, great conversation. I appreciate your time this morning. I appreciate all your insights, and I look forward to catching up with you again very soon.
Yes, stay safe, everyone. Good luck.
Cheers, man. Thanks. Thank you, man. Bye.